On the quiet morning of December 7th, 1941, light cruiser USS St. Louis lay anchored at Pearl Harbor, her crew preparing for a weekend leave. Maintenance had left her boilers cold, her guns silent, and her antenna inactive. It seemed like just another day. Bill Canavan, ready to go ashore, heard the unmistakable rattle of gunfire from above. Initially, he thought it was another drill, a routine exercise among many. As he rushed to the deck, he saw the olive-drab aircraft marked with the rising sun emblem of Japan. This was no drill. Hell broke loose over Pearl Harbor a second later. With most of the crew ready to leave, Canavan and many of the crew took their battle stations, as the captain ordered the ship to prepare to move, despite being underpowered and undermanned. The harbor was a scene of devastation, filled with the wreckage of American ships and a swarm of Japanese fighters attacking from above. Anti-aircraft guns blazed as the boat maneuvered through the inferno. Enemy aircraft targeted St. Louis, but her gunners struck back, downing 2 fighters as they raced through the channel. Just as the ship seemed to break free and the crew began cheering, spotters sighted a Japanese submarine waiting outside the harbor. Abruptly, she launched 2 torpedoes and then began streaking towards St. Louis. Only a reef stood as the ship's defense, and there was little room to maneuver. Was Lucky Lou's luck running out? Lucky Lou's development background can be traced back to the end of World War I, when the world powers signed several naval treaties that sought to avoid an arms race. Such was the case of the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 and the London Naval Treaty of 1930, which imposed limitations on the size and armament of capital ships. As a result, naval powers, including the United States, sought to maximize the capabilities of their light cruisers within these constraints. For instance, heavy cruisers were limited to carrying 8-inch guns and a displacement limit of 10,000 long tons. Like any other naval power, the U.S. Navy sought to make the most out of these limitations to make its warships as lethal as possible, but the Empire of Japan and the German Third Reich were on the rise. For the U.S., the Japanese were the direct and immediate threat for a simple reason. The swift expansion of the Empire of the Rising Sun in Asia was palpable to American colonies and territorial possessions in the region. Both nations knew very clearly that a clash between them was inevitable. It would come down the road sooner rather than later, and the U.S. Navy decided it was time to prepare its fleet for total war to counter the Japanese. Already aware of the Mogami-class light cruisers introduced by the Japanese, the Navy decided to develop a vessel of similar capabilities within the limitations of the Naval Treaty. So the Brooklyn-class light cruisers were born, a series of 9 ships representing a significant step forward in American naval design, combining heavy firepower, speed, and versatility. Among them was USS St. Louis, laid down in December 1936 and commissioned in May 1939 as the tide of war in Europe and Asia approached. She had a length of 607 feet, a beam of 61 feet, and a draft of 19 feet. Following the latest naval treaty guidelines, she displaced over 9,767 tons and some 12,000 under full load. One of the critical features of her class was their heavy main battery of 15 6-inch guns arranged in 5 triple turrets. This gave them a significant firepower advantage over previous light cruiser designs, which featured fewer guns. Recognizing the increasing threat posed by aircraft over the Pacific, USS St. Louis was designed with a versatile anti-aircraft armament, including 5-inch dual-purpose guns and an array of smaller caliber anti-aircraft guns. She was fast and agile as a light cruiser, with a top speed of approximately 32.5 knots. This allowed her to perform a variety of roles, from fleet scouting and screening to commerce raiding and shore bombardments. Furthermore, the Brooklyn-class cruisers featured improved armor protection compared to earlier light cruisers. St. Louis featured an armored belt between 3 and 5 inches thick and deck armor over 2 inches thick to defend her against aerial and surface threats. When World War II broke out in September 1939 and tensions with the Empire of Japan increased, St. Louis was mobilized to Pearl Harbor, where she arrived in November 1940 and remained there until December 7, 1941, a day that would live in infamy. While stationed at Pearl Harbor, the light cruiser was on limited duty. 2 of the 8 boilers from St. Louis were removed for cleaning, while the rest were ice cold. Furthermore, there was no electricity, and the guns and antennae were inoperative for maintenance. This would save the crew from harm's way in a strange twist of fate, as many of the men prepared for weekend leave, such as Bill Canavan, who, while getting ready to go ashore, abruptly heard machine gun fire from above. He assumed it was another of the 100 drills they had gone through recently. It was not. He rushed to the deck and spotted an olive-drab aircraft with the unique red ball, the rising sun emblem of Japan. Decades later, one of Canavan's shipmates, Al Seaton, would tell the Washington Post, quote, "We'd been so well trained that our initial reaction was that it was just a drill-happy officer having another drill, but the sound of the guns was strange." Then came the sound of thunder and peril. It was around 8 a.m. when hell broke loose over the base. The Empire of Japan was attacking Pearl Harbor. With the rest of the crew ready to leave the ship, Canavan and Seaton rushed to their stations. Meanwhile, the ship's captain, George Arthur Rood, ordered the cruiser to be ready to move, despite lacking 2 boilers and the main armament. The crew would endure 20 minutes in hell for the ship to be ready to leave the trap in Pearl Harbor. While more men arrived every minute to assume their battle stations, the Japanese wreaked havoc outside. In a heartbeat, the fate of nearly 1,000 men aboard USS St. Louis was sealed as enemy shells rained down. The chaos was unimaginable. American sailors on other ships were fighting for their lives. USS Arizona, once a proud defender of the fleet, lay shattered in the harbor, obliterated by a single bomb that pierced her deck and detonated her ammunition stores. A hellish eruption tore through the ship's core, leaving nothing but twisted metal and flames. Nearby, USS Oklahoma struggled in agony, capsizing in the oily waters. USS Honolulu, sister to St. Louis, was also among the wounded, a testament to the ruthless precision of the Japanese pilots. The skies were no refuge. Of the 394 American warplanes grounded that fateful morning, only 38 managed to take flight. 10 of those were swiftly shot down by the relentless swarm of the 353 attacking Japanese aircraft. The air was filled with smoke and the choking stench of burning fuel as the Pacific Fleet faced its darkest hour, but St. Louis and her crew were ready to fight to survive. Anti-aircraft fire erupted from the light cruiser as it lit up the sky, aiming precisely to take down the swarm of Japanese fighters. As St. Louis began to make her way through the harbor to break free from the destruction, she became the target of the enemy pilots. Bombs began to fall from above, and machine gun fire splattered the water around the ship, but the crew, committed to its survival, fired non-stop, striking down 2 fighters as St. Louis rushed through the channel. As she reached the edge of the harbor from the south, the crew cheered. The fight was not over yet. Spotters sighted a Japanese submarine in ambush formation ahead of the ship. The submerged vehicle was on the reef, close to the harbor's entrance. Suddenly, the enemy fired 2 torpedoes. When the captain ordered the ship to break away from her course, the enemy explosives detonated on the reef, mere yards away from St. Louis's beam, earning her the nickname Lucky Lou. She survived the ordeal at Pearl Harbor, the only vessel that made it to open sea during the battle with no casualties. Her crew and the ship had survived without a scratch. In the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, Lucky Lou became the most traveled ship of 1942, assisting in several combat operations in the Pacific. She first began escort missions for troop ships carrying U.S. Marines to Samoa. She then joined Task Force 17 to support American airstrikes in the Marshall and Gilbert Islands. Lucky Lou escorted ocean liner President Coolidge, who was carrying Philippine President Manuel L. Quezon. Lucky Lou then prepared for the invasion of New Georgia in 1943, joining other warships to support the Kula Gulf landings on the island's north portion. After spotting enemy positions, the Navy ships unleashed the might of their guns. Japanese destroyers arrived in the Gulf, but withdrew before engaging the superior American force. At around 1 a.m. on July 5th, the American task force detected the Japanese destroyers, led by their only ship equipped with radar, the Izuki. The American cruisers, including St. Louis, opened fire with radar-directed salvos, launching approximately 1,500 shells within 5 minutes. The intense barrage from the American cruisers quickly sank the Izuki, the flagship of Rear Admiral Teruo Akiyama. However, the Japanese destroyers Suzukaze and Tanakaze managed to launch torpedoes before retreating under a smokescreen. These torpedoes struck USS Helena, causing catastrophic damage and her sinking. Once again honoring her name, Lucky Lou survived the ordeal, ready to fight the Japanese on their home islands. On July 12th, Lucky Lou and Task Force 18 set sail to intercept a Japanese supply convoy. At around 1 a.m. on July 13th, the Allied forces encountered a Japanese unit led by Rear Admiral Shunji Isaki, comprised of light cruiser Jinsu, 5 destroyers, and 4 destroyer transports. In the ensuing Battle of Kolombangara, the Allied cruisers, including St. Louis, focused their fire on Jinsu. Within minutes, the intense shelling caused Jinsu to explode and sink after a direct torpedo hit. The Japanese destroyers briefly retreated to reload before launching a second torpedo salvo. The Navy task force pursued the retreating Japanese, engaging destroyer Mikazuki and damaging it. At 2:08 a.m., Lucky Lou was struck by a torpedo in her bow, causing minor damage but leaving her out of combat. Although the Allied forces succeeded in sinking Jinsu and driving off the Japanese destroyers, they failed to prevent the Japanese transports from landing 1,200 troops on Kolombangara. Meanwhile, Lucky Lou returned to the United States for repairs, returning to combat in late November 1943, participating in shore bombardment operations in Bougainville and the Shortland Islands. She remained in this role until she was called for duty to participate in the Mariana and Palau Islands of June 1944. Lucky Lou joined Task Force 52 and arrived off Saipan on June 14th. The following day, she unleashed a lethal barrage against Chelan Kanoa, providing critical naval support as the 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions landed. Lucky Lou remained close to the shore throughout the intense fighting, targeting Japanese defensive positions to clear a path for the advancing Marines. After the initial bombardment at Saipan, St. Louis moved south to participate in the preparatory bombardment of Guam. She continued supporting operations through the Battle of the Philippine Sea, providing anti-aircraft cover for the refueling group on June 22nd. Detached on June 24th, she returned to the Marshalls as American forces secured victory on Saipan by July 9th. She then headed for repairs, stopping in Pearl Harbor before reaching California. By November 1944, she rejoined the main fleet in Leyte Gulf, where she fended off Japanese forces and prevented several kamikaze attacks. Despite her heavy defense, one kamikaze struck her, destroying several of her small guns, igniting fires in the hangar, and taking the lives of several sailors. She began to list and was close to getting sunk by the enemy, but Lucky Lou made it out alive for repairs. After completing repairs in March 1945, St. Louis joined the fleet at Ulithi and was assigned to Task Group 58-4, where she provided anti-aircraft screening for carriers launching strikes on the Japanese home islands. As part of Task Group 54, St. Louis participated in the bombardment of Okinawa, supporting beach landings, covering underwater demolition teams, and protecting minesweepers. She encountered torpedo threats and endured intense operations, offering gunfire support through mid-May. After a brief respite in Leyte, she returned to Okinawa and continued her support roles. In mid-July, Lucky Lou joined Task Force 95, patrolling and conducting strikes in the East China Sea until the war's end on August 15, 1945. Lucky Lou was sold to Brazil in the 1950s and remained in service with its navy until 1980, when she was sold to a ship disposal company. From the waters of Pearl Harbor to the shores of Okinawa, USS St. Louis, Lucky Lou, embodied the fighting spirit of the U.S. Navy, her 11 battle stars honoring the ship and the crew's remarkable journey through World War II.